There were moments in life when a single breath could change everything, moments so sharp they carved themselves into memory like sunlight cutting through storms. For me, it happened on a quiet morning in mid-spring, surrounded by the warm aroma of vanilla and flour floating through a small bakery kitchen where I used to hide my sadness behind jokes no one took seriously. It was on that ordinary day that I made a silly, playful comment I had made 100 times before, except this time it didn't bounce away as a joke. This time, it came back with an answer that shattered every wall I had built around my heart. Before we dive deeper, if you believe kindness deserves second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Chronicles. It truly helps stories like this reach more hearts. My name is Aaron Solis, a 32-year-old man who had spent most of his adult life trying to stitch together the broken pieces of a past I rarely spoke about. I had worked at a delivery company for years, carrying heavy boxes across the city under the bright daylight skies, thinking responsibility alone could erase the emptiness left behind by someone who once promised to love me forever and didn't. My routine was predictable: wake up, work, pretend everything was fine, go home, sleep, repeat. That loop held me like a cage for almost 2 years, until the day fate led me to a small bakery painted in shades of blue, with windows always wide open so its scent could spill into the street like an invitation. The sign above the door reads Solara's Oven, and I would later learn it was named after the owner's late grandmother. The first time I stepped inside, the warmth of the sunlight poured through the glass walls and illuminated every corner, turning the bakery into something that felt less like a shop and more like a safe place I didn't know I needed. The woman behind the counter was Mariel Vesper, 29 years old, dressed in a flour-dusted beige apron and wearing her wavy dark brown hair tied loosely behind her head. She looked like someone who woke up with purpose, someone who understood quiet joy, someone who belonged to the daylight. Every morning, she welcomed customers with that calm smile of hers, the kind that didn't try to force happiness but naturally made you feel lighter. I didn't talk much back then, but Mariel always found a way to make conversation feel effortless. She had this gentle habit of noticing the small things, the fact that I always ordered the same almond cake slice, the way my shoulders relaxed the moment I smelled fresh pastries, the way I hid sadness under humor. She picked up on everything, even when I didn't want her to. For months, I visited her store on my lunch break, each time telling myself that I was only there for the cake, even though deep inside I knew I came for the peace she radiated. One afternoon, when the sunlight hit the counter just right and made the frosting on her cakes sparkle like polished glass, I made a joke I had made before, but this time it slipped out without me thinking. In a playful tone, with a fork in my hand and a smile trying to hide my admiration, I said, "If no one marries you soon, I will. Plus, I swear I'll eat every cake you ever bake." It was harmless. It was silly. But it was easier than saying, "I'm scared of falling for someone again, but I think it's happening with you." Mariel paused for a split second, something she had never done before, then she laughed softly, not mocking, not dismissing, just thoughtful. What I didn't know was that behind that soft laugh was a storm of emotion she kept hidden as well. Life wasn't kind to her either. Her bakery wasn't just a business, it was the last thing she had left from her grandmother, who had taught her everything about baking, compassion, and resilience. After losing her grandmother, Mariel took over the bakery, promising herself she would make it a place where people found comfort. But dreams came with struggles. She was barely keeping the business afloat, and while she smiled at everyone who walked through the door, she carried heavy worries about debt, long nights, and broken sleep. Yet she still stood behind that counter, offering sweetness to a world that wasn't always sweet to her. The shift came on the day I found her sitting alone in the back kitchen, her head buried in her hands as daylight streamed in through the skylight above her. I had arrived at the bakery late, only to discover the front door unusually locked. I walked around the side entrance and noticed her through the window, trembling quietly. My heart clenched. Without knocking, without thinking, I walked inside. She looked up, startled, trying to smile again as if the sadness hadn't been there at all. But this time, I didn't pretend not to notice. I sat beside her in silence, letting the soft hum of the morning fill the gaps between us. She didn't speak for a long time, but when she finally did, she confessed the bakery might close within a few months. She said she feared losing the only thing that gave her a sense of belonging. That day, something in me shifted, not out of pity, but out of genuine connection. Seeing Mariel vulnerable made me understand just how much light she had given others while her own flame was flickering. I listened as she told me she had been trying to manage everything alone because she didn't want to burden anyone. I realized then that loneliness came in many forms. Mine was silent and heavy, hers was bright and tiring. In the weeks that followed, I found myself spending every free hour helping her. Delivering boxes wasn't my only job anymore. I painted shelves, fixed lights, cleaned storage rooms, carried heavy sacks of flour, and tested cake batches even when she insisted I didn't have to. There was something incredibly healing about those mornings when daylight streamed through the windows while we worked side by side. She would mix batter with careful hands while I rearranged the seating area, and though we rarely talked about feelings, our silence became a language of its own. The bakery slowly returned to life. Customers noticed the change, the renewed energy, the warm glow, the way Mariel laughed more often. And in that time, I found myself laughing more too. Our bond grew naturally, beautifully, like something the daylight itself nourished. Then came the moment I didn't expect. One sunny afternoon, after a long rush of customers, Mariel placed a small cake in front of me, a new recipe she had been experimenting with. It was topped with delicate white frosting and small edible flowers. She said she made it because it reminded her of simple happiness, the kind she thought I brought into the bakery every time I walked in. The confession caught me off guard. My heart raced, and before I could stop myself, I repeated the old joke I had used so many times before, trying to mask how emotional I suddenly felt. With a shaky laugh, I said again, "If you keep baking like this, I really will have to marry you. I mean it, I'll eat every cake you ever make." But this time, she didn't laugh gently. She didn't brush it off. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes soft and unwavering in the golden daylight shining through the window behind her. She said the words I never expected to hear, not like this, not so simply, not so sincerely. She whispered, "I thought you'd never ask." And for the first time in years, something cracked open inside me, something tender, hopeful, overwhelming. From that moment on, everything changed. We didn't rush into anything dramatic. Instead, we learned each other slowly, lovingly. Mariel shared her fears, her dreams, her quiet hope to turn the bakery into a place where people could heal through kindness and sweetness. I told her about the heartbreak I had carried for too long, the way it shaped me, the fear I had of being left again. And in the safe light of her presence, I realized not all love was meant to hurt. Some love felt like morning sunlight, warm, steady, patient. The bakery blossomed. Customers returned steadily, drawn not only to the desserts but to the joy that filled the space again. And on bright afternoons when the sun hit the glass walls just right, Mariel and I would stand side by side behind the counter, breathing in the scent of warm sugar and fresh air. People often told us we made a good team. They didn't know how true that was. Near the end of summer, after months of working together, laughing, rebuilding, and dreaming, I finally asked her the question properly. Not as a joke. Not as a shield. But as a man who had learned to love again. I took her hands in mine, right there in the middle of the bakery filled with the aroma of vanilla and warm sunlight, and I whispered that I wanted to build a future where her laughter would be the first thing I heard every morning. She didn't wait a second before saying yes. And when she did, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. If this story touched your heart even a little, I kindly invite you to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Chronicles. Your engagement truly helps us continue sharing meaningful stories that bring warmth and hope to others.